You're receiving this EBP CEU because you are a preceptor. So how does all of this work within being a preceptor? I wanted to make sure that you guys had a very good understanding and background of what medical documentation is before I expected you to go teach this to your students. So we're going to talk a little about the standards of education, and we can see that although these are just the list here, that there have been a few changes throughout the different editions. Currently now there's a large amount of standards that students must complete within their medical documentation and healthcare competency while they are in clinicals. And so it's important that we're reinforcing that clinical education from the information that they learned in their didactic school. And we want to think of that as one thing. So let's try to get the idea as preceptors that they're not learning one thing in the classroom and one thing in the clinic, that it's together their athletic training education. An important thing to talk about is the social learning theory. And so this meme's kind of a funny way of saying it, but if you watch somebody do something, are you able to learn it? And we know that this is true. So I am not implying here that your students are going to be able to magically learn how to do documentation just because you've completed it. What I'm saying is that they're going to be able to pick up your habits. So if you're someone who's completing documentation instantly, your students will see that and will see the value. If you're someone who does not put an emphasis on medical documentation, your students will not understand the importance of medical documentation and theoretically will be less likely to complete their own documentation when they are a certified athletic trainer. And so this is something that's very concerning to us as educators, that our students are not following in. And so making sure that you are modeling good behavior for your students is imperative as your work as a preceptor. We know that 90% of healthcare students state that their role models shape their attitudes and behaviors. So what are you doing to your students? Like I talked about, if you're documenting well, they're going to see that. They're also going to see your actions and words. So if you have a positive reinforcement toward medical documentation, that's going to be something that they also follow. And we know some current research has just been submitted to the Journal of Athletic Training and the Athletic Training Education Journal, knowing that we need students to be involved. We need for them to be able to have that time for documentation. And so a recent qual interview that happened, we were able to determine why they had students document. So some of their main intentions were for learning and competence. So having that idea of getting to genuinely determine what is medical documentation and be able to actually do it well. And then having that time to practice. So we want our students to be able to go in and have that time to learn. Imagine if you had never completed medical documentation and you were asked to do it for the first time as a certified athletic trainer in your transition to practice. That would be overwhelming, and it's setting them up for to fail. We also know that there was some deterrence within those attentions. So athletic trainers may have tried and wanted to do things well with the students, but they may have done something like double documentation, where the student wrote out on a piece of paper the documentation, and then you typed in the electronic health record. Some other issues that came up within the intentions is that we only allow upper level students to document. And I think this is a huge issue for students. So if you're not being able to do things your whole entire career as an athletic training student, then all of a sudden are put into it at the end, you're not going to be very competent at what you're doing. And so getting the students involved, teaching them, getting them to be allowed to do as much as they know is a very important way. Maybe they can only complete a part of the evaluation and you're sitting there watching them. That's a great start. We also found that mentorship was very important. So some logistics. So being able to be there and watch the student and then come read with them is important. We also know that there's a degree of oversight that must occur. So students can't just sign and complete medical documentation on their own, but they also don't need you to sit over top of them and do it. So it's important to get that value of looking at that balance of looking at their work, but still allowing them to complete the medical documentation. And we touched on it a little bit, but why do you double the work? So we're already busy. We're already in a time that we say we may not have the time to complete the documentation. So let's streamline the process. Allow students to type into your EMR and you check and sign before they save it, or everything is completed into one file, or whatever it means to you at your place. Try to eliminate some of the extra workload and excess work that you don't need to do. So I want to thank you for listening to the video portion of this home study. My contact information has been given to you within the home study. So if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out at any time. I'd be happy to chat with you, talk with you, come up with ways to help improve the documentation at your setting, and to just give you the best experience possible, and also to help the continuity of care of your patients. So thank you for giving me the time to speak with you today, and please don't hesitate to contact me.